I'm going to do something a little bit different today. For some reason, I am being called to share more of myself and more of how I've done some of the things that I've done with my Lil Urban Farm. And I don't know why, but I'm being called to share more from a personal level. So I'm going to try to start doing that more. I guess I'll start with how I started all this. And it's kind of a long story because it's got many parts. Food advocacy has always been something that was important to me and I was passionate about. I've had friends who have struggled and couldn't get benefits even though they really needed them. One friend in particular had a mom who was disabled. I saw how hard things were for them sometimes. And so because of things like that, I started to have even more compassion for what was going on in some people's lives, where maybe they haven't had great jobs, and maybe when they have had jobs, they didn't pay them where they had proof. So because they didn't have proof, they then couldn't get benefits, and no matter what they did, they'd get turned down even though they really needed them. And I watched other people who had parents taking care of other things for them, and they were off claiming, benefits that they probably had no business claiming. So I do know that it gets abused, but I also know that it doesn't always get abused by the people that we think it does. That was an eye-opener for me. I have always had a love for gardening, and my dad was a gardener, my grandfather was a gardener, and I am technically, I don't know if it's third generation, second or third generation of a refugee from the Ukraine. My family is German, mostly. And after, the world wars, they were taken as slaves for Russia in the Ukraine, and they were land workers. So my great grandfather told his son, leave, go. So he stowed away on a ship into Canada and found his way down into the Midwest, and he was a farmer. So I think for me, it's in my blood, and somehow the calling found me. My parents were not farmers. No one in my family that's close to me were farmers, and somehow this life spoke to me. I just knew it. I knew this was what I needed in my life. I always said, I think we need to go backwards. As much as we need to go forward with technology, there's a part of us that needs to go backwards. We need to be growing our own food. We need to be having our hands in the dirt. We need to care for the planet again. That's been in my heart my whole life. I've just always felt that way. And, watching the medical industry and health and pharmaceuticals and all of that, it breaks my heart. I have family that I've watched take pill after pill after pill to make things better. And I watch my parents. My dad has cancer, so he doesn't really have a choice. But I mean, it's hard for me to see that. And I think some of it, not all of it, but some of it can be prevented. I started to care about vegetables. I started to care about being healthy and spreading that message, not in an overreaching way, but, I just always talked about it. And I always said, I think we need more of this. I think we need more veggies in the world. We need more plant-based people in the world, which brings me to me being plant-based. I actually, my whole life, have never liked meat. Didn't know why. And I remember having a conversation with my cousin when I was young. I was probably a teenager, saying, I think I should be a vegetarian or vegan. I also have allergies to dairy and milk, so the vegan thing has always been kind of right there too. And she said, you can't be a vegan or a vegetarian because you're not doing it for political or, for saving the animals. That, so you can't be. And of course, at that age, I listened. I went, oh, they're right. I know that sounds silly, but when you're a young teenager, and things weren't as accessible back then for those of us who are, you know, in our 40s. So I continued, you know, doing what I was doing. And I don't know, somewhere along the way, about 10 years ago, I went, you know what? Yeah, I'm going to embrace this lifestyle. I think it started because I watched Food Inc. If you've never seen it, they talk about the industrial farms and what the industrial farms are doing to our land, to our animals, to hormones, to, you know, everything that you find in the grocery store. And it really stuck with me. And I couldn't look past that. I couldn't. And when you guys see stuff in the news and they talk about, you know, them doing certain things with farms, they're usually talking about the big farms. They're not talking about the little guys. I think everybody wants to protect the little farmers because we need them. You know, they're people that feed us, and they are part of our community. It's the industrial guys that a lot of times you hear about in the news that they're going after. And I'm not gonna speak for all of them, but they sometimes take shortcuts, and you know, they feed animals things they shouldn't be fed on, so they don't have good health, and so they have to rely on antibiotics. Well, now the antibiotics are a huge part of what those animals are made up of and what they produce. So, you know, the milk that we're feeding our children is now laden with hormones, and you know, they're going through puberty faster. These are all things that have changed us. And you know, this isn't conspiracy. This is real. this is happening. You know, I'm not a doomsdayer. I'm not someone who's going to say, oh, the government's coming after us. It's not like that. At least not from my eyes. But the stuff that's happening with the industrial farms, that is real. It is real. We're seeing it. And we'd be naive to think that that doesn't affect us, and that it doesn't affect our gut biome and other things that serve us and, you know, keep us well and keep us healthy. So yeah, that's kind of some of the backstory to, you know, why I think and do some of the things that I do. One of my friends started a charity, The Bulb, and it was, oh gosh, I don't even know how many years ago now, 5 years ago. She would probably know 6 years ago. And she was a social worker, and she wanted to help serve areas that are vulnerable. Some people have heard the term food deserts. I don't know how PC it is to use that anymore. They call them vulnerable neighborhoods. And basically what it means is there's neighborhoods where people don't have access. They don't have access to get the food that might give them better health. And so it keeps them stuck in a cycle of eating these processed foods, and then their health deteriorates. And so they're constantly having to find a way to go to the doctor, or they don't go to the doctor because they can't afford to. And so their health just continually declines, and that gets passed on from generation to generation. If they have children, you know, they're there too. So it's heartbreaking. And when she said that she wanted to do something to make a difference with that, I was 100% on board. I wanted to help. So we would deliver food. We would go rescue food. We'd drive around to some of the farmers and see if they had food that they weren't going to sell that wasn't too bad. She started also talking to grocery stores, and eventually that's where she got to, where she was rescuing food on a pretty large scale. But it started with us, you know, with small amounts of food that we'd gather or take as donations, and we'd drive around to some of these neighborhoods, or we'd post up at a little convenience store that's kind of far away from civilization, and we'd pass out things and take donations, and the donations we'd turn back into more food to try to give to people. I still think of that very fondly. It was part of my heart's calling. It was part of her heart's calling. And then I had this house I was renting. It had a plot of land in between that was like an empty lot. And I loved gardening growing up. I was never very good at it, but I always loved gardening. So then it became a mission of, how can I put in this little community garden? And I used pallet wood and recycled wood. My friend and I, my friend that started The Bulb, hi Alicia, I remember going to Home Depot and they had a bin of like scrap wood, and we grabbed all the scrap wood and we had no idea what we were doing with it, but we were like, oh, but we're going to take this and we're going to turn it into something. And I built just a couple little beds. She was really good at grant writing, and so she had signed up for a grant to help fund me getting compost and soil to fill the beds. And my ultimate plan was to enroll my neighbors. You know, I was right in the heart of Rock Hill. It's a tiny little town. And I thought, I'm going to enroll my neighbors. This is going to become a community garden that we're all going to work in. I'm going to set it up, but we're all going to work in it. And, you know, the understanding will be, oh, if you want some veggies, just put in a little time, you know, weed a garden or whatever. And of course, that didn't really happen. It ended up being me gardening for the most part, which was fine. That was fine. Didn't always take the best care of it because I've always worked a full-time job. So getting home to it, to water it, you know, you get home and you're tired. You're not thinking about it. So it became more of a thing I put in the dirt and expected it to grow. And I was always shocked when it didn't. You know, I didn't fertilize. I didn't pay attention to what the needs were of any of these plants or anything. Fast forward to COVID, and I was watching people be so afraid of not having food. And I had spent years making relationships with local farmers, purchasing from local farmers for my own needs. I always went and bought farm fresh eggs. That doesn't mean I didn't go to the grocery store if I was in a pinch. You know, we're human. You know, if the store is right there and I'm baking a cake and I find out I'm out of eggs, I'm going to go to the closest spot to get the eggs. But for the most part, I tried on weekends to either go to the farmer's market, or I tried to go to a farm stand and get eggs or get, you know, local tomatoes. Oh, nothing beats local tomatoes. Y'all, if you are shopping in the grocery store and you've ever had a tomato and it has no taste, there's nothing to it. That's industrialized farming. Go to a farm stand and buy a local grown tomato. It will change your life because the flavor that they have, it's just, you can taste the vitamins in it. That's one of the other issues with industrialized farming is they're robbing our food of the minerals and the nutrients that we need. We think we're getting it because we're eating this tomato. It's not grown the same way. It's not getting the love that it needs to actually be a healthy tomato. I started buying, you know, vegetables, eggs. At this point, I think I had already given up meat, except for fish. I do still eat a little bit of fish because I think it's really good for our brains. And I know that there's certain vitamins and things that I need, especially being mostly vegetarian, you know, your B and D vitamins, which I think is part of the reason why I have ADHD and some issues is from lacking some of that stuff and lacking some of the minerals like the magnesium that I need. So that's a very real thing. So I started sharing with everybody on social media, and I wasn't panicking. I was one of the few that wasn't panicking. I think because I knew I gardened, and I also preserved my own food. And so I had, you know, cans of food that were preserved, and I thought, well, whatever this is, it can't last. You know, it can't last that long, first of all. Second of all, I'm not worried because I've got food, you know, I can make this work. I was more worried about the toilet paper. So yeah, I started sharing with people where they could get food. It became as little as, hey, here's a dairy farmer. They have milk. Here's someone that has meat. You know, meat did go up in price, but, you know, people could get to their local farmers to get the meat and the eggs. Even something like bread, you know, people were having a hard time finding bread, finding flour. I had a friend that worked at Jimmy John's, and she was like, by the way, we're giving away free bread. So I would broadcast that and let people know, hey, there's free bread. I don't know why this is where I ended up. It just is. I wasn't afraid. Other people were, and I'm a solution seeker. I try to find solutions to things, and so that was my solution at the time. I happened to be a communication major. I wanted to be a news broadcaster way back when. Not now. You couldn't pay me. But I think finding information and sharing information has always been part of my passion. It's been part of who I am. I want people to have the information that they need to make the best choices. I don't want to make the choices for you, but I do want to give you the information so that you can make the choices. I want to teach you so that you can, catch your own proverbial fish. I think that's how it should be. And I don't think there should be gatekeeping. I think we should be sharing all this information so that we can all live better lives this way and have all this information so that we're not afraid. That's kind of how it started during COVID. And then I had another friend who had been telling me, you need to film this stuff. You need to film this stuff. And I thought, oh gosh, I'm not going to film this stuff. Nobody wants to see me. Come on. I finally did. And it was from the standpoint of, I know how to garden. There are people who are afraid. They maybe don't know how to garden. And even though I maybe don't know how to garden all that well, I can at least help people get a couple tomatoes in the ground. I can at least help people figure out which vegetables will grow. And that's how it started. It started with me doing garden tours on YouTube. Those are still available, by the way. They are, gosh, was it 4 years ago now? They're not very good. They're not cut. They were literally mostly just a straight captured video. Some of them are 15 to 20 minutes long. And I would share my garden. I would share my problems. I would ask for help in the videos. Like, hey, this basil has this spotting and I don't know what's going on. Can you help me? And I also started turning to Facebook gardening groups to ask for help. Like, hey, I'm having this issue. I don't know what's going on. Now, prior to this moment in time, I didn't really have time to stop and ask these questions, or at least I didn't think I did. It was just something that I was like, oh, that stinks. And I would keep going and I wouldn't try to solve it. Well, with COVID and, food being necessary, it became, how do I save these plants? Or how do I deal with this issue so that I don't lose my plants? Because that could be my food supply. So I got an interest in what was causing some of these issues and started looking into it further. Like, hey, what is this? Oh, this is blight. Blight is bad. Blight is no wonder I couldn't grow many tomatoes before and the plants would always look so yucky. I just thought that was part of their life. I didn't think there were ways I could stop that. And I've learned, cut that stuff off. You could try copper fungicides. Sometimes that works. You could try other natural things like baking soda with a little dish soap and water, which we'll try that this year. I don't know if that works. We're gonna try it, I think. But that's how it started. If I saw a bug, I wanted to know what the bug was. So I would look it up and go, how do I take care of this organically? What does the life cycle of this bug look like? And I just learned as I went, but I filmed it as I went and as I was learning. So that's actually why my slogan is Let's Grow Together. It's actually more because I also lean on you all to teach me. This isn't about me teaching you guys. This is about us all teaching each other. And that was important to me. That was important to me that we all did it together as a community and learned from one another. When I moved, I decided to buy a house because COVID scared me with the housing situation, with prices going up, rent going up, all that kind of stuff. And I wanted more stability. So I did buy a house, and it is more out in the country now. So where I was right in the heart of the city before, I'm not now, though I think I'm still considered urban. I'm not that far from a Walmart. It's down the street and a Lowe's. And if I drive 20 minutes down the road, there's a little shopping complex. I'm not that far. It feels like country, but it's actually not. But when I found this piece of property, it was very interesting. In fact, here, I can show you. It's all woods in the back, and there used to be a big tree here, apparently. And there was this big open space in the sun, right there. Never in my life. You either have houses where they're surrounded by trees, and so you can't garden, or maybe there's no trees. I somehow ended up with this middle world that I can't tell you how happy it makes me. If you believe in manifestation, I do believe that I manifested this for myself, and I'm so grateful. So grateful. I do think my grandmother in heaven helped with some of this. But anyway, when I moved here, there was nothing. There was nothing. There was one single rose that the previous people had planted. But all the stuff that's around the fence line, all the gardens that I've built, all the flower beds, I've built all of that myself. So I do want to say, for some of you, like, if you are afraid, say you're a single person and you're afraid, you think you need help, you just have to find it within yourself. And you can do it. I did it. Did I know what I was doing? No, not necessarily. But once you start to do it, you start to gain a little bit of confidence. And all of a sudden you realize, I can figure this stuff out. And you can too. So yeah, I built all this, and I take care of all this with Brenna. And I do have 3 rescue kitties and the chickens, and we make it work. I still work a full-time job. And that's why sometimes it gets a little challenging for me to do videos every single day. I don't have another means of support, so I do have to work at the same time. And I love doing this. I would love to do this full time. Unfortunately, the gardening doesn't pay the bills, and the chickens certainly don't pay the bills. They're freeloaders that they are half the time, but I love them. So anyway, that's kind of how Lil Urban Farm got its start. And I didn't really get too popular. I mean, you know, here I was on YouTube. I had maybe 100 followers. My highest base was maybe like 65-year-olds and up, which I thought was adorable. I loved it. People would interact with me and I would talk to them. I still, to this day, even with a larger base, I try to talk to everybody if I can, just because that's important to me and that community is important to me. But it wasn't until I went over to TikTok, and I was very hesitant. I did not want to be on TikTok. I kicked and screamed, and I was like, I don't want to do this. My friend was like, you need to. You need to. And I'm like, oh, fine, I'll give it a try. I'll give it a try. So TikTok sort of opened up a whole new world. And all of a sudden, I was getting more followers, and it started to grow, and it started to snowball with some of the crazy ideas that I get to try. Some work, some don't. But I share it regardless, because that's what I do. I don't care if it fails. I don't care if it fails and I'm on camera and you see that it fails. It's part of the process. And we can look and go, well, it was good in theory. Maybe not in execution, but it was good in theory. And sometimes I also get advice from others who can help me and say, hey, try this. And that can make a difference, you know, and then we together can solve that problem. So yeah, that part's been fun. And I have turned into more of just a teaching space. So everything that I do is kind of teaching people how to tend their plants and how to look for certain things. I do try to include some of the little critters and bugs. That was actually something that came from my childhood. I've done a lot of inner child work, and it's so funny when you look backwards. I can see exactly how I got here. If you would have asked me that 5 years ago, I would have been like, what? What are you talking about? What from my childhood would carry over? I wanted to be a leaf teacher. I don't know what that is, but guess what? I am now a leaf teacher. I'm a leaf teacher. You know, granted, those leaves are attached to bigger plants and mostly edibles, you know, edible plants, but I'm a leaf teacher. I also was one of these strange little kids that loved bugs. I loved my bugs. One of my favorite things on the planet was my ant farm. I had jars that I would collect spiders and caterpillars, wasps even, and the wasp nest. Oh yes, because I had to study that wasp nest and I had to see how they emerged because I was fascinated by this stuff. So I have a deep fascination for the little buggies and learning about their life and what they do and where they're beneficial and where they're not beneficial. And it speaks to my heart. It speaks to my inner child. And so there are times that I'll get really, really excited, like finding swallowtail caterpillars on my bronze leaf fennel. Like that was so exciting for me. And then it became a daily, I have to go check on the caterpillars. I gotta go see what they're up to. So there is stuff in your heart and from your inner child that if you embrace it, it's such a game changer. It is such a game changer. Like the passion that I feel for this stuff because of that, it's a whole nother level, because I'm doing it for me as much as I'm doing it for anybody else. I'm doing it for me because it brings me joy. And that's where, that's where passion should live. It should come from that place of, not just a need, although they're, needing food is a big reason and a good one. But that inner child needed to have her hands on the plants, needed to have her hands and her bare feet in the dirt, needed to, learn about her bugs and share about the bugs and make sure other people know about the bugs. Especially my orb weaver spiders. I love those. People hate spiders, not me. Now, I got a little scared moving to North Carolina 20 years ago and learning about brown recluse spiders. That put a little damper on my spider love. I don't pick them all up anymore. In fact, I don't pick up any spiders now, but I admire them. And the orb weavers especially, I call them the guardians of my garden. I'm not going to hurt them. Yeah, they might be big honking things like this, and they're beautiful. They've got the yellow coloring on them. They may look scary, but guess what? They're eating bugs. They're eating mosquitoes. They're eating flies. They're eating the stuff that I don't care for. So they are welcome in my garden. They are welcome. They will catch some of that stuff that you don't want that's flying around, and yeah, they'll take care of it for you. I was just feeling called to share with you guys, share with you how I got here, share with you how the Lil Urban Farm came to be. It came from a long line of trusting my heart and trusting where my soul was taking me, and that's where the Lil Urban Farm is now. And I can't always give everything to people, that I want to. Like, I give away a lot of stuff for free. If people come to visit me, I give them plants. If I'll give them eggs, that's what I believe in. Even during COVID, I did a lot of bartering. If I grew a lot of zucchini, I would put it out and somebody else would bring me baked goods. I love that form of life. I think we need to get back to a lot more of that. I can't, unfortunately, give everything to everybody away for free because not everybody lives here, but I can to my local community. And my local community is really important to me. And even though I'm kind of out in the country now, I still will give away stuff, at least to my friends. And sometimes I'll even put it on Facebook like, hey, who needs some zucchini? Who needs some eggs? And it's important for me to be able to do that. And come to find out, my grandmother used to do that too, apparently, way, way, way back. The people that didn't have homes, that were transient, that would kind of go around. And she would feed them. She would make sure they had food, and I try to do the same thing. So I love that, and I love that I carry my ancestors with me, and I carry so much of that lineage with me. And I hope that when people experience the Lil Urban Farm, I hope that they feel that too. I hope they feel that that comes from a long line of people that just want to help others. I'm gonna go finish my coffee, and I hope you guys have a wonderful day in your gardens, and let's grow together.